This is like how one of the runners was found out when they were cheating. In the video, it was like a clean cut. You wouldn't realize that there was mistakes happening before. But in a wave, it was like this clean cut where you say like, hang on, something is wrong.
Oh, pro tip, guys. If you want to cheat in your speedruns, use crossfades. It's not that... I'm an audio guy, so it's not that difficult.
You can offer this as a service, Martin, like
I was
online
going to say, guys,
service.
send your files over. I'm really good at this.
Welcome to the Finer Games Club, where high-class taste meets low-tier gameplay. My name is Martijn, aka Foodie.
And I'm Martin, aka Vishy. But today I feel like our little slogan is not true, because today we actually meet high-class gameplay, if I'm being correct, because we have a very special guest with us that you're going to introduce, Martijn.
Yep. Today we are diving into the wondrous world of speedrunning, competing in playing games as fast as possible. But, of course, there was no way to do this one without help, so we thought, why not get an expert on board? Joining us today is a very special guest and the first ever member of the Finer Games Club not named Martin or Martijn. He's a veteran speedrunner from Germany, known for his mastery across a wide range of games, from Deus Ex to Command & Conquer to Age of Empires. He currently holds world records in Deus Ex and the Age of Empires 2 Attila the Hun campaign, both in co-op, because apparently being fast solo was just not enough. You might have seen his runs featured at events like GDQ, ESA, or even Hackathon Offline. Outside of gaming, he's also a competitive Wushu athlete, representing internationally, and somehow, he's also a father of 3. So without further ado, please welcome Heinki.
Hey there, welcome.
Hey Heinki. So this is a fantastic honor because I've been following you for a long time already. I can't even remember the very first time I saw a stream of yours, and of course it was my love of the game Deus Ex that brought me to your stream, and I was always immediately captured by the way how you presented all the stuff that you did, and you were always explaining things that were happening during the stream. And when this idea came up, like we were going to do an episode about speedrunning, I was immediately like, okay, Heinki is the number one choice for this. That's the person we need. So I'm not sure if I missed anything in my introduction of you. Is there anything else that we need to know about you before we start?
No, I think that is most of it already, of course, in a summary. But yeah, I feel very honored that you're thinking of me first and also wanting to get into Deus Ex, because after all, Deus Ex, even though it is quite famous in the gaming area, especially when it's coming to early simulation RPGs, it is still very niche. Like, not a lot of people are aware of it, and like not many people are interested. But it's like mostly the older generation, or also with the newer games, that people get captured into it. But they of course did not play the first one, and then it's always a different fit. But yeah, I feel honored to be here.
But and those who know it, everybody who knows the game accepts that it's the best game ever made.
I mean, there is also this meme, like when someone mentions Deus Ex, someone is reinstalling it on their computer. So
yes,
I'm definitely one of those. Maybe I was even the one that created that meme. I'm not sure. It's just, it takes about 3 seconds of the UNATCO theme for me to realize, like, oh damn, I haven't played this in 2 weeks. I have to reinstall it.
I think it's been like 6 years for me or so I'm not completely up to date, but I must have finished it.
Shame on you.
At least 6 or 7 times within my lifetime. So.
Oh yeah, I think how many times have I installed it? Well, Heinki is gonna trump that easily, but I think around 50 times. I think
he does it 6 to 7 times a day, I presume.
I mean, I only installed it once on my computer, but I installed it on on marathon computers. Does that count?
Oh yeah, oh definitely.
So let me ask you a very ignorant question. How many times do you beat the game in a day if you wanted to?
Oh, so like it depends like how much time I have to do, but since a run takes around 40 minutes, I could beat like it a couple of times. Like once I did like 5 consecutive runs with no resets, so it took me like around 3 to 4 hours. And back in the days, I also did something which I called like the anthology run or quadrilogy run back then, where I did all the 4 games in a row before Mankind Divided came out. So it was like Deus Ex, Invisible War, Human Revolution, and then The Fall back then.
And am I right to assume that the first game is the most suitable for speedrunning?
I mean, honestly, all of them are very suitable for speedrunning, but the first one is the one which is having the most glitches and the most tech-oriented tricks in that regards. Like, if you compare it with Human Revolution, you have only a couple of glitches there, but you have to use them very often. Like, it's basically your bread and butter through the entire run. In Deus Ex, however, you have so many different techniques which you will only use one time just to save 12 seconds and then you will never use it again. And in theory, you could use them later on, but then we have a new trick which is even faster and even better, so we use the new trick, and then later on we find a newer trick, so we abandon the previous trick, and then you only have the ultimate way of doing that trick. And so you have like many small glitches and big glitches which you combine, and sometimes you just use them once and then never again. That is what makes it a bit different and special.
So I was wondering, if we're talking about speedrunning, of course, there will be people listening here that were just like, their ears are flapping and they have no idea what's going on. So maybe we could actually take a little bit of a step back and talk about what speedrunning actually is, right? Because a lot of people will know that it's about playing games fast. But are there any other things that people should know? For instance, like what categories mean, what is a glitch, why is it allowed to cheat, so to say? How would you explain that as being a runner?
Yeah, so like as you already mentioned, like a speedrun is basically playing a game from start to finish, and what we call categories is basically that definition. So like which category you're doing. So most people know it as any percent, and that is like from start to finish as fast as possible with glitches allowed. What most people, when they hear the speedrun, think of is the so-called glitchless category, which is where you play from A to B or from A to finish, but you are not allowed to use glitches, or only those which are defined as not glitches. And so you try to beat it as fast as possible. But all of them have the same thing in mind. You want to beat the game as fast as possible under the restrictions you put yourself into. So if you do like 100% category run, for example, you still want to beat it as fast as possible. However, you try to also get everything to 100%, and then obviously depending on the game, depending on the community, you are allowing certain glitches which allow you to stack you to 100%, or where you are not allowed to do those glitches and you have to do it like the, let's say, casual way. So this is how you would define it.
Oh, it's like different disciplines, right? It's like a marathon versus a sprint versus a dash or whatever.
Yeah, correct.
Swimming.
And as far as I know, any percent is kind of the most well-known and the most popular category, which basically means everything is allowed that you could do. The only thing is you have to get to some defined endpoint that is defined for that specific game. So whether that's reaching the credits or beating the final boss or something like that, that's when the timer is allowed to stop, so to say. It doesn't matter how you get there, as long as you get there, basically.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Also, the other definition for like when you finish a game is like when you put the last input before you're taking the control of a game. So basically you cannot manipulate anything anymore, which means like, you reach the end. So this is like where it's it. Because some games...
Deus Ex is like when the end cutscene starts, so to say.
Yeah, correct. For most games, it's the credits, but there are also like some special games, like when I think of the Devil May Cry games, they had to define it differently because during the credits, you have the fighting scene. So to avoid that people purposefully just die at the start of the credits and lose time or gain time, they said like, the moment you finish the certain cutscene and then have the credits, then it's when we stop it. But this is just like a small exception which I know of. But normally it's just the credits or the last input.
What do we do about cutscenes and load screens and those types of things?
That is an interesting question, because depending on the games and depending if you play it on console or on PC, you have something called a load remover. So if you have a powerful machine and someone has a less powerful machine, it won't matter, because normally you deduct the loading times you have in between. Because obviously, if someone has like the greatest computer of all time, or like a quantum computer, if you want to exaggerate it, they would have loading times which are going very quickly depending how much resources the game needs. And if someone has like a old toaster where they run their game on, it will load much longer. So what we do is like we have memory slots in the games where the developers take a look into when there's a cutscene happening, and it normally always loads that same reference. And in that moment, we know, okay, we need to pause the timer. And when it moves out of that memory slot, you can play the next. You start the timer again, so it unpauses it at that moment. And also the same like with the final ending, like if it's a credits or the cutscene, normally also has like this memory address, you can access it, and then you just stop the timer. So everyone has mostly an accurate timer. For console games, it's a bit difficult. Like there are some tools where they use like image capture to detect if it should split it or not. Or you need to manually remove the times, like with a video editing program, or literally just count the frames, which some people do.
It's kind of nice because it kind of removes the pay-to-win element of it, right?
Yeah,
like, it's
definitely.
like, yeah, I want to be good at speedrunning, so I'll just get 5 50 90s and I have 0 loading times.
Yeah. In some games, they use the in-game timer, but that is not always accurate. And obviously, you can also kind of cheat if you failed like in a boss fight and you know like, oh, I lost like 30 seconds, you could reload that save file where you saved and then just try it again and get a better time. So that is like more of a risky approach to do it. But there, most of the time, people, when they do any percent category, any percent recordings, they all do something called real-time attack. So it means like you use a actual real-time timer, and then you deduct the loading times from that run. Or if you have both, you can do it. Like nowadays with the tools we have, like for Deus Ex, we have auto splitters, as I just mentioned. So every time I save and load, it will automatically remove that time, and I don't need to do anything manually. And at the end, I can compare my real time with the real load remove time. So we have both times. If you want to compare it, like if someone has a more powerful machine or less powerful machine, you can see like, this is how much the difference is. Yeah.
That's wild. So there's not a lot of cheating going on in that scene and that culture, I assume. Is that like an honor thing, or is it bad?
Well, it is. Luckily, it's not that bad. Like most people know that they do their speedruns because it's fun, because they want to challenge themselves and they want to approach a certain goal. However, in the past, there were people who obviously faked their records, more obvious or less obvious, and then later on when they were found out, because the tooling become better, because the reverse engineering which people did, like the glitch hunters did, to understand certain mechanics got better, that they could figure out those persons. And there were also some very interesting parts how they figured out someone was cheating, when they looked at the waveform of the audio files and saw that there is like a clean cut, and they knew someone was editing that. It is very interesting and crazy to see how creative people were going with that, to basically make sure that nobody realizes that it's a cheated run. And when they were found out, it's mostly the same excuse that they say, like they had no time, they wanted to just get it done with, and some obviously wanted to get the fame in that moment. But it of course is a huge backlash in that moment. Like they lose.
It's so funny to me, because I'm laughing towards Martijn because we're both guitar players, and this rings so true for the current guitar world. Doesn't it?
Really?
We have a lot of guitar players watching, so it's very interesting. The same thing happens. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Wow.
Like
okay.
People that are recording things and making it seem like it's live, but it's not live, and there's all kinds of things, and. Yeah. But you're talking about the creativity of trying to cheat things, but I guess the creativity and the power of mind of people trying to find out if people are cheating, it increases over time as well, right? Yeah. Because looking at audio waveforms, that's crazy level. But
that's like Sherlock levels of crazy.
I wasn't aware of that. That is insane. But yeah, that is like how one of the runners was found out when they were cheating.
Oh wow!
Because literally in the video it was like a clean cut. You wouldn't realize that there was mistakes happening before. But in a wave it was like this clean cut where you see like, hang on, something is wrong. Like how can there be this? Like if you saw it and you heard it, you wouldn't realize it. But in the edit, because it was like just a frame, or I don't know how you call it, but like literally this one little bar was gone.
It's like an audio, like a waveform cut in the middle, so to say.
Correct.
You could say like, okay, there's been something cut out there that wasn't there before.
Yeah, correct. Because it like went high and suddenly it's like in the lower part, and you can see it. It's like not the with a decline, but it's like a sudden jump. Like if something was
pro
like
tip, guys. If you want to cheat in your speedruns, use crossfades. It's not that I'm an audio guy, so
yeah,
it's not
okay.
that difficult.
You know what's the fun thing is? Someone made a video how to cheat on speedruns as a joke, and he literally did that. He was saying like, oh yeah, they figured it out because of a waveform, so he did this fading thing so people couldn't recognize it, and then they said like, yeah, okay, this run is valid, and then he took it down himself and said like, hey, this is just an I did this for an experiment, etc. But it's just
You can
funny
offer
that
this
you
as a
mentioned it.
service, Martin, like
I was
online
gonna say,
cheating
guys,
service.
send your files over. I'm really good at this.
Please don't do it.
So I wanted to ask you, like, we've kind of already kind of gone pretty deep into what speedrunning is, how people do that or pretend to do that, so to say. But what actually drove you personally to get into to speedrunning? How did you get into it? What motivated you?
Yeah, so back then I was playing a lot of StarCraft 2, and there was one streamer who was playing I Wanna Be the Boshi, and back then I also played I Wanna Be the Guy, and I was like interested to see it. I didn't know that there is something called the fan game community where there are like thousands of those sorts of games. So I went on Twitch, and the first person I saw in 2012 was Kelmandu doing I Wanna Be the Boshi any percent run. I had no idea what any percent meant for, so I just started watching the game, and I saw how skilled he was because it was a speedrun, so he needed to do all the tricks, and I was just fascinated by it. So I started watching and getting more and more into speedruns because it also got suggested to me through Twitch. Like, I didn't even make an account back then. I always just looked through the front page, looked at the games which were playing, and then I saw like, oh hey, I Wanna Be the Bushi had like 100 viewers, so I knew the Speedrunner is on, so I immediately joined in until I made my account in 2013. And this is how I got into the speedrunning scene. And then Joshimus and Lots of S were doing a race of Deus Ex Human Revolution. Both are known for San Andreas in 2013 back then. And I saw it, and I loved Deus Ex Human Revolution when I was playing it as a student. And I was like, yes, I wanna try that. It looks like fun. And I already know about the speedrunning scene and watched some speedruns from European Speedrunners Assembly or like GDQ back then. So I got into that. I just wanted to try it out, and this is where we are.
So that's
It's very
kind of
interesting to me. Yeah.
that's kind of where it started. But how do you keep going? Like, because of course you have been going from one game to another. You've done a lot of the Deus Ex games. I think almost all of them, maybe except for the second one, which is communally agreed that it's just not that good.
I did the second one too, but yeah.
Oh, I feel sorry for you to have to expose yourself to that game so much.
It's okay. There's a mod now, so it makes it a bit more playable and less crashy, but yeah.
So what motivates you to learn new speedruns or improve old ones? Do you do it to attain records? You just do it for challenging yourself personally? What kind of reasoning do you have behind that? What drives you?
Yeah. So for me, the interesting aspect is like because I really like Deus Ex or Deus Ex Human Revolution and I wanted to replay it, it is like a different way of playing and enjoying the game. Because now, when I was playing it casually, you don't know a lot of the game itself. Like, you know about the lore, you know about the world, you know the story and so on. But you don't know how did they develop it. Like, what are the quirks behind textures? How does the collision work in the game? And basically, what makes it so interesting for me is like the game becomes my sandbox. Like, I know so much about the game at this point that I can figure out new ways or find out different cues or Easter eggs or also like mechanics, how they developed it, but it makes it more interesting for me. And also I really like to push the game to the limit. So for me, it was never about like, oh, I want to get world record. I had them as well, yes, but for me it was like, how far can I humanly push it to the limit with the knowledge we have at that time? Because obviously over the time routes will change, new tricks will be found, and people will be investigating into the code and looking into it and find out how certain mechanics work, and then we can obviously abuse that since we know how it's programmed. And I find this aspect very entertaining and very interesting, and since I'm a software developer myself, I also understand the reason of why or why not this was fixed or left in the game, or why the developers did that. And I can also go into depth and say like, what the reason behind this. Because if you play casually, like there's a funny scene in Deus Ex Human Revolution at the start when you go into Seraph Manufactory. You have this helicopter scene with Seraph talking, and you get introduced to the mission. And this entire cutscene is not played in a helicopter, but like underneath the level you spawn, and if you clip in there, there's just this helicopter scene cut out in half, and you can see like only one side is rendered. And this is a common technique in game development, and you can explain why it's done like that. And
it's the same with elevators and stuff, right?
Yeah, correct. Elevators are literally loading triggers to deload the previous part and load the next part, so to save memory and not crash your graphics card by loading too many materials.
This reminds me so much of my father, because my father is very interested in electronics and stuff, and he would always tell me that as a kid he would have a little radio, and one day he started unscrewing it and looking at all the pieces and parts and how they're put together and how it functions. You're basically doing that, right?
Yeah.
You're taking the game apart and looking at the individual pieces.
Sounds like me when I was little. I mean, my parents would they would sometimes buy new toys for me that, like a little car, you could pull it back and then it would drive with some kind of spring inside. And they were always super mad at me because it would take about 1 hour before I had taken the whole thing apart to see how it worked on the inside, because that was more important to me than the toy itself. Of course, what would happen is I wouldn't know how to put it back together again, but it's kind of the same thing, right? You're treating it with some kind of scientific fervor or something like that. You want to know how something works, not just that it works, but also where that is coming from. So that's what I'm hearing, is that is a big motivation for you too.
And it seems like a lot of these games are really just castles built on sand, right? It's like, okay, it's holding up, nobody touch it. Like, don't put it under any scrutiny. It looks like a castle. Let's leave it at that. But if the closer you look behind the facade, you see the cracks in the simulation, and you actually see how it's put together, like with duct tape, which I find super interesting. Which reminds me, like, again, me from the musician's perspective, sometimes when you have a certain mix and you have to use some kind of weird automation or routing, and it just doesn't work the proper way, you do some kind of workaround. Okay, it sounds almost like the real thing, and only I know that it isn't.
Nobody else will notice.
It goes into that direction, because mostly people always assume that even if a new game comes out, that those glitches and discoveries we had like 20 years ago will not be found again, or something similar. And then you look into that and they're always the same broken thing. Like, only because it's a new engine doesn't mean that it's not broken. Like, for example, Cyberpunk has so many weird tricks where you can speed up with doing a katana slash using the slow-mo effect, and then it accelerates you by 100 times, so you can just go faster than a car, and that's like your best way of traveling, for example. Or like in Human Revolution, when you know that the collision is frame dependent, then you can just lower your frame rate to either VSync, and then just throw an object against yourself and the collision will not work, and you can just go through the wall, for example. Or like in Deus Ex, where they forgot to disable a script when you go into the menu, and it just applies your augmentations infinitely, so you can do something
the
called
super
the super jump, where you can just jump over everything in the level and you don't need to have any restrictions. It is very fascinating to see that and find it even in modern games, like the newest Doom, for example. Another example, if you go into the menu while you do a slide, you will slide forever, so you can go through doors and just go into the next area.
I'm playing that right now. I'm going to try that.
I shouldn't have said
that.
No, you broke everything. This actually ties into like a theory that I had, because I know that there are some really old games like Super Mario World or Ocarina of Time, where there are some really crazy tricks with kind of memory manipulation and that kind of stuff. And I was thinking like the chance that those kind of things exist with current day games is probably not that high. So do you kind of think that old games are more broken in general, or it doesn't matter in your opinion?
I wouldn't say that they're more broken. It's more like, because of the time and the better tooling we get, it becomes easier to look into the code and look into what the developers were thinking of or forgot about. So if you have like an old game, obviously we do a lot more research on it. And over the time, there's a lot of knowledge about it, a lot of tricks. And like even in Deus Ex, there's some tricks we had to do before, until we found a newer glitch, and it becomes like a history thing. And even in newer games, like the engine specific things can always happen. Like Unity had one issue: if you use the custom controller of a game, of a game engine, you could infinitely jump as long as you put something underneath, and you could basically fly. And it's still an issue if you use that base controller, unless you write your own one or you fix that. And so it's not per se that you would say like, oh, because it's an older game it's more broken, but it's more like how much research has been done and how much stuff has been found. Because if you have something glitch breaking from the start in one of the newer games, then obviously it doesn't matter anymore what you find, because you can break the game. And then that is the point where if you find something like a wrong warp, that the community says, okay, we have any percent which is with a wrong warp, but we also do a new category which is called any percent no wrong warp. And then you still look into the game and find newer or crazier strats, which break the game in a completely different dimension.
And you mentioning community, how much of this is a community effort? How much is there competition, and how much is there like we're all in the same boat, we're tugging this in the same direction, we all want to get better and help each other get better?
Yeah, this is like one of my favorite parts in the speedrunning community. Like, the speedrunning community is very close together, they work together, and they break the games together. Obviously, everyone has a different role. There are some people like me who mostly just do runs because I think they're fun and I just want to improve my times on it. But there are also people who don't run the game at all. They just look into the code because they're interested and reverse engineer it, or they also just try to find glitches or funny tricks and show it to the community. And then we learn or see it and we're like, oh, what can we do with it? And then you have people who are just interested in routing the games. So they don't want to even perform on a high level. They just want to see like what is the most optimal way to beat the level, and is it possible? And then you work all together to figure that out. Little fun fact: there was one trick in Deus Ex which one runner figured out, which only he could do on his computer back then, which basically saved him 30 seconds compared to everyone else, and it almost broke the game for us because we couldn't figure out what the reason was. So at one day, like, all the runners, one modder for Deus Ex Revision came into the stream, the other person and me with cheat tools, we were looking into this entire mechanic, and also another person who looked into the reversed code, engineered code, and we all worked together and figured out what the condition was that it works. And it was pretty funny to see that even though it's the same game, if you have the GOG version or the Steam version, they are slightly different. They have a different condition for some reason. And when we looked into the code part, we figured out what the condition was and basically figured out how to go work around it so that the trick works. So just to...
He bought it on a Sunday.
Yeah, something like that. But what we figured out was the condition was that if the render time is below 4 seconds and if you hit the trigger, then he stays there. So what we figured out is, okay, we don't do the mission, so that one part is gone. But the problem was the render time. So for most people, when they went in there, it was around 6 seconds or 11 seconds. And on the GOG version, it was 2 seconds. So the guy was able to rush through and get there in 2 seconds so that Tong does not despawn, and then he can finish the mission without taking the mission. Yeah. That is just insane. And because we checked the code, we figured out, okay, as long as you've seen him and you hit then the trigger, he will stay there. So we go out of bounds because that resets your render size. Since you see him, it's back to 0, and then you have 4 seconds to rush to him, and then he stays there.
I know exactly which moment you're talking about. Yeah, that's the Hong Kong part where you meet Tong for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all of this just for 30 seconds, right? And I say just because I know that Deus Ex is relatively optimized. So 30 seconds is a big deal, of course, in Deus Ex. But in some other games where a run takes hours or maybe 2 or 3 hours, then of course 30 seconds doesn't make a whole lot of difference. But I guess here with Deus Ex is pretty optimized, right? So 30 seconds makes quite a difference. But if you have a game like, I don't know, Ocarina of Time or something like that, then 30 seconds would be the world, right?
Yeah,
because
definitely.
That's even more there.
Yeah, and if you have something like GTA San Andreas 100%, then 30 seconds is like, whatever.
Yeah,
because
you
the
just
run
go
is
to
going
the
for
kitchen
16
and get a
hours.
coffee because it doesn't make enough difference, right?
And may I ask, what is the most difficult technique you've ever had to learn? What took you the longest? What was the most obtuse, the most challenging?
I would need to think about that because, like, at some point when you do a lot of speedruns, every trick is different in their own term. Like, you have different audio cues, you have different visual cues, and you have also different approaches how you do it. Like, everyone has like a slightly different setup, but always going in the same direction. And I need to think of what is like a very tough trick I had to do because at this point I've
Can I
done.
do a prediction? Like
sure.
at least for Deus Ex, where I think what I think is probably one of the most difficult ones, the law shot through the ground.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
This one's
that
hard,
is,
right?
Yeah, that one is hard, but not because of the shot itself, but because of the alignment. Okay, just to explain it to the viewers. So you have like a drop door, and that is like at the start of the map. So you spawn at the top, and on the 5th level is the guy you need to kill. So
That's the only goal you have in this mission, right? Where
Correct.
Is that
where
the military camp?
Yeah, that's that military base.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the only goal you have in this map is killing that one single guy, and it's apparently possible to take your law and shoot through the ground with it because apparently I've watched your explanation, so maybe I can try
yeah, sure,
it.
Go ahead.
The projectile of the law spawns maybe a meter in front of the law, not where the barrel ends, so to say. So if you aim straight down, then you can actually spawn the projectile past the trapdoor.
Oh my god.
Yes.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, but you have to actually look at the ground and look at the pixels and then find an exact alignment of pixels so that you can shoot it down the shaft and kill the guy, and then the helicopter spawns and you can exit the map immediately.
This is like Luke taking down the Death Star.
Yeah. It's very similar.
Yeah, it goes that direction.
Was that explanation correct? Or
that is correct. There is nothing wrong with that. Just like a little hint. Why is it the law we use? Because you can do the same with a gap gun. So the problem is we shoot at the railing of the 5th floor because the guy is in the center of the map. So if I shoot at the railing, I wouldn't kill him. But the law explosion is so big that it would get the entire 5th floor and you kill him with that hit. So it is very important that you hit that railing with the law because the explosion just destroys everything on that floor, and that is the reason. Like if you use a gap gun, it wouldn't, like the radius is too small, so he would survive, for example. But yeah, that is everything else perfect. 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So, if this is kind of like a speedrunning moment, right? Like, is there any kind of, if you think back on your speedrunning career, so to say, is there any type of moment that you would say that was my favorite speedrunning moment ever, or a favorite speedrunning trick from any game, of course, not just from Deus Ex? What would that be?
Yeah. So one of there are so many actually, but one of them was when Maxim, like a Half-Life runner, came into the Deus Ex community and literally was like, yeah, can you explain me how some of the tricks are or which glitches you found? And we were like, yeah, sure. So we showed him the material, and like literally 3-4 days later, he comes in and is like, guys, did you know that saving and loading is very broken in this game? And we were like, what do you mean? And then he figured out, like, this is like what I mean with Deus Ex replacing one glitch with another. We had a trick which is called the glitchy save. So it's basically breaking the in-game script and reloading the entire map if you want to. So we can go back and forth to get an augmentation canister to get running on the 3rd level from the start. So this was like, it was not slow. It just took like 15 extra seconds and you have like the fastest speed you can get in the game. Maxim comes in, figures out that if you kill yourself, you save and load, your corpse stays there, you go
in... loot it?
Yes, but you go. But that is not all. You can go back into a loading trigger because you saved and load. It will cache all of the items you had before. And this cached value comes back once you go into a loading trigger. So you get back all of the items you lost in that moment. You go back into the previous zone, you loot yourself, go back into the next area, do the same thing, shoot yourself, save and load, go back, get all the items again, go back, loot yourself, and then suddenly you have 4 of the augmentation canister and you don't need to dupe it the other previous way, and it saves 20 seconds because it's more convenient than going back and forth, back and forth.
I saw this in I saw this in a live run with a recording with you, and the whole explanation. It was just so chaotic and fun. You were like, "Oh, I'm dead. Oh, I'm alive again. Oh, and now I'm gonna smoke, and I'm dead again."
Smoking kills, by the way.
Smoking kills. Yeah.
It does kill in that game, right?
Yeah, because you have like 0 health when you do this trick. So then you want to dupe your body again. So you take a smoke and that kills you. It's just hilarious. It's really great.
It is amazing. Like there's so many. Deus Ex we found so many things over the years and to optimize it, and there were so many different things we figured out only recently, like with Maxim coming into the community like around 2019, 2020. This was like one of the bigger new discoveries. The same with the Hong Kong glitch we just talked about. But also like at the start, we had something called grenade clips, and they were like very horrible because if you throw a grenade on the floor, they rotate, but you couldn't influence the rotation. So if you did not get the rotation, you would need to do all of it again.
RNG.
And until we figured out you can save before the rotation, and that allows you to just load and be having like a higher percentage to just get through the door. And so like suddenly we saved like 40 to 50 seconds because we do a lot of grenade clips everywhere. It's just small things like that which makes it so much fun and so interesting.
Is there any other RNG in Deus Ex, or is it like, for example, there are certain Dark Souls runs that I've seen in there, and some of them depend on a certain item drop that is like a 10%, 15% chance. So your run could end very early if that doesn't happen. How's that with Deus Ex? How much RNG is involved?
Like, the grenade clip before with the old strat was 1, but besides that, there's only one trick which is RNG dependent, and everything else is not anymore, or it doesn't matter or influences that much. So there's one trick at the start where you are on Liberty Island, and instead of taking care of the terrorist leader, you immediately go to the headquarters, you get a gas grenade, and you throw it into the corner, and then you have
I've tried that one.
Very good, very good. And then you have to pray that the guard inside goes into
into the gas.
Goes into the gas. Goes into panic mode and doesn't get out. Correct, and runs out and not get stunned. If you get stunned, it's over basically. You cannot influence anything anymore. You would need to restart. Luckily, as said, it's like in the first 40 seconds, so it doesn't bother us. So we can just reset and it's fine. Or you can do a save before that, but normally you only do that during marathon runs. And then you
what if that was at the end of the game? What would you do?
Then I would definitely use a save file and just try to do a setup again, because then you cannot influence it. It would be too bad or too sad to just lose a run just at the end of the run.
It's like a minute in, right? This, or maybe even less, 45 seconds or something like that.
Yeah, so that's why it doesn't bother us. So we just reset and just start, talk with Paul quickly, grab the gas grenade and try to do it another time. But it's like literally the only RNG we have right now. There was another RNG part before, which was duplicating ammunition for your gap gun. Before you needed exactly 20 shots. So in the old route, when you were escaping UNATCO headquarters after you were put in prison, you went to the workshop and duplicated the rockets there. So we also allowed a free scrolling mouse wheel. So if you use that and you apply a pickup on that, you literally can just pick up infinitely items and with 100% success rate. But obviously, if you don't have a free scrolling mouse wheel, it is not working. So people who did not have it were like in a had like a
disadvantage.
Had a disadvantage, correct. So we also allowed a macro which exactly does that. So if you don't have a free scrolling mouse wheel, no problem, just press that button and pick it up 100 times in like one frame. It's fine.
But it's a really interesting trick, right? It's like one of the main things you'll see in Deus Ex runs, people like dropping medkits, and as the medkit is falling to the floor, people are picking it up from the air with the pickup bound to the mouse scroll down or something like that. And you scroll really fast, and you actually can pick up 10, 20 times before it actually disappears.
That is so crazy.
Yeah. And the only reason that works is because the entity is not, like, they don't check if the entity was picked up and then just reduce it by 1, but they leave that item in the world and say like, okay, you have now 4 frames before this item vanishes. So it is not picked up, it's just basically a delete command. And because you have 4 frames, and if you pick it up multiple times during that time, you can obviously pick it up multiple times, and then you have like before two of the medkits, and suddenly you have 15. So yeah,
And
very
why
good.
would anybody do that from a developer standpoint? Is that to save memory? Is that to streamline something?
No idea. Maybe it was just like easier to work on it, or they don't wanted to bother with it because they said like, yeah, if you pick it up after 3 frames is like literally nothing. So they were just thinking
Yeah.
like, yeah, we just delete it and the engine will do its thing. So, or there's like some engine restriction. I'm not sure, not really aware of that, but it's like the interesting fact that allows us to do that trick, that we can just pick it up multiple times before it gets deleted.
Man, I'll never play games the same way again. This is amazing.
Yeah, this is how you
Yeah.
see it. Like if at some point if you have the speedrunning lens, you see things differently. You see,
Yeah.
like I literally recently played Expedition 33, and there was like a rock with like another rock on top, and I was like, "You're not supposed to go over." I still tried it. I managed to go out of bounds, and then I was soft locked, and I had to load. But it was like that was just my curiosity driving me, and was like, okay, I want to try if I can break it or go behind it. And then I managed to do it, and I had to load it, and I was like, oh, you fool! Now you have to do the fight again because it didn't save for some reason.
Just because
You've
you got
become-
too interested.
You've become Neo. You're dominating the Matrix now. You can just see the ones and zeros everywhere.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So I was wondering, of course, speedrunning started by people doing unintentional stuff, right, in games. But I think recently we are starting to see examples of where maybe some speedrunning stuff becomes intentional, or a developer says like, well, I know that people are kind of abusing this, but they're not hurting anybody by it, so why would I remove it? So I saw a video recently by the developer of a game called Blood Thief, where he said that speedrunners kind of broke his game by doing all kinds of unintentional things to go faster. And he kind of embraced it, and he kind of starts optimizing his game so that it can be speedrun. What do you think of that as a speedrunner? Do you think that should be embraced, or should it really be as much unintentional stuff as it can be?
Like, first of all, I love it since I'm a developer myself, and what most people always think of is like the developers are lazy when they leave those glitches, but that is not the case. It's like so unique or so precise. Like no casual player thinks of, hey, let me take a box, go put my FPS on 60 FPS, and then throw the box against myself perfectly aligned next to the wall to go through the wall. Only if you know about it, you will do it. And as a speedrunner, we only do that. And it doesn't hinder the casual experience, and the speedrunner can do it because of the knowledge. And most of the developers know that. Like in Dust Force, there are some levels where you're not supposed to go or get out of bounds, and the developer found it really cool. So for GDQ and other events, like also I think Celeste did that, they put like extra cherries or extra strawberries in the level which you're not supposed to take. So if you wanted to take them, you can get it, and then you suddenly have categories like 102% where you're not supposed to have it, and it makes it much more fun. And some even go one step further, and they put like this auto load remover in the game already, so you don't have to use the timer, and everyone has the same accurate timing, and it's really really cool. Like they basically what I also saw was like in I need to think what the game Neon White was it? Like there is a speedrun
I've
mode.
played that. Yeah.
There is a speedrun mode, and there was like one trick where it crashed the game for 50% and nobody knew it. The developer looked into that because the speedrunners were frustrated, and he fixed it for the speedrunners and said like, it is only a thing for the speedrunners, it doesn't involve the casual players. So he's like, here you go, now you can do it for 100% consistency, and everyone loved that. And this is like one of the cool moments, because like when it goes in the direction that it involves a casual person or casual people playing the game, and it destroys the experience, then they should fix it and make sense. But for in our case, like if I throw a box against myself and collision is done like
doesn't
that,
hurt anyone.
it doesn't hurt anyone. Yeah, like he would otherwise he would need to go into every level and increase the collision size by like, I don't know, 2 pixels, 3 pixels, something like that, so it's just wider, and it makes no sense because only a specific group of people will do that.
There are some really funny examples of this. So I know, for instance, that in Tomb Raider 1, there is a med pack that cannot be reached by any normal means. And seeing as they did the remaster recently, they left that med kit in place. And you can only reach it if you use like the corner bug, which is
Oh,
a jump that allows you to kind of shimmy into a corner. And then there is kind of a logic in the game that if you are out of bounds, then the game will check, is there a platform right above me with the same, let's say, X and Y coordinates, but just not the same Z coordinate, that I can put you up to so that you're back inbound, so you're not getting stuck or something like that. And if you're good enough, then you can trigger that, and you will basically just teleport to the top of a block, and that is still there. And it turned into an achievement in the remastered version, and it's I think it's like "you old corner bug" or something. That's what the achievement is called. And I think that's really cool that they're just embracing, like, yeah, that was there. Somebody put that there. Never thought about, okay, this is unreachable. You can't get there, but they're just embracing the fact that that's in there, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, yes?
No, there's another game where I can think of, and I want to be the Boshi. At the early stage of development, there is a trick where you can jump and then shoot a save button and then reload that and then jump again and shoot it. So you can basically hover on the same position if you are good, very good. And so what the developer did is, because you're not supposed to go into that screen at all, you're not supposed to see it at all. But if you manage to jump onto the other side of that map and get the trigger, and you drop down to get to your goal, but there's like a text where the developer wrote, "You're not supposed to be here, speedrunner," and then like an angry face just as a joke. And I find that like just very humorous. And some people are like that, or like some developers find it cool and then build it in or have an achievement like that. It's really cool.
It reminds me a little bit of the modding community as well, although on the other side of the same spectrum. The speedrunners and the modders are what keep these games alive over decades, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like a second life for the game, right? Like I'm pretty sure that Ocarina of Time and maybe even Deus Ex, but particularly Ocarina, probably wouldn't be as alive as it is today if it weren't for the speedrunning community.
Yeah.
And
like,
what do you think? What kind of person does it take to become a speedrunner? Like who are the types of people that are drawn towards speedruns?
Like the good thing about speedrunning is like everyone can do that. Like if you have a certain game in mind and you want to learn it or just try it, you can just go for it, because most of the games have like easy glitches, intermediate glitches, expert glitches, hard glitches, and glitches which you will never do it just for like so-called segmented runs. So everyone can try it. And what I also like to do is, like, once I did a showcase with also Deus Ex, where I had one person who was not a speedrunner and one person who was a speedrunner, and we went through the first 3 stages in 30 minutes, and they managed to do all the tricks and understand it. So they managed to do the body duping, so they get all the augmentation, they managed to do the gas grenade throw, they managed to go into Hell's Kitchen, and it was really cool. It's like really nice to see. And also there was like one German show, speedrun show, where I was a part of back then, which was called 3 to 1 Zack. And there we also did something called like a glitch showcase. So we did a race against each other. We were all speedrunners in this case, so it's a bit different. But we had one person show us the tricks, and the others tried to do it as fast as possible with one explanation. And the one who wins basically gets a star, and then we saw who got the most stars at the end of a level or at the end of a session. And yeah, that's why like everyone can learn it, because it depends like how much time you want and effort you want to put in. If you want to save more time, for example, since you're already having good times, then it makes sense to learn the harder tricks. But if you're like at the start and you can save like 20 minutes in your run and you want to be getting better in that, then you just learn the easier tricks. For me, for example, it's a good example because I learned it, the game last year was like Jedi Knight Academy 2. Like I just learned the game, and there are so many different physic abuses tricks that I only learned the beginner part, and I'm losing tons of time, like maybe 20 to 30 seconds per level. But my execution is anyway so bad right now, it doesn't matter. I can just go with that until I improve to a certain level, and then I can start with the next tricks.
So it's kind of like an 80...
meat and potatoes first. Yeah.
It's like an 80-20 rule, right? Like with 20% of the tricks, we can already attain 80% of the result, and then it kind of like squares off like that.
Exactly, yeah.
And if anybody got inspired today to try speedrunning for themselves, where would you advise they would start?
All right. So there are like a lot of resources. Like that is the good thing. Like back then in 2012, we had only one forum, which was called Speed Demos Archive. and there you needed to look into the forum field, like if there are like glitches or explanation. But most of the time it was just, here's a video of my world record. Okay, cool. And then you needed to figure out everything yourself, literally just copying what you see there without any explanations. But nowadays, if you want to get into it, you can either look for a tutorial on YouTube, which is where you find most of the stuff. You can find Twitch speedrunners or speedrunners on Twitch where they stream that and do their attempts. They can also send you to their Discord community. There is speedrun.com, which is mostly the global leaderboards field where you can find all of the games, all of the speedruns. And even if they're not there, maybe you're the first one and try figuring out how to get into that, because there are always like some people who are alone there, and once you are there with someone else, it becomes like snowballs, and then suddenly a lot of people get into that. But there are a lot of resources and explanations and tutorials, and as I said, like now that technology is also getting better, and you find like better 3D model software like Blender, being able to, for example, open Prince of Persia Warrior within maps, and you can see where all the triggers are. You can basically analyze like how this level works and how you can circumvent it to skip a certain boss or enemy, and it is much easier nowadays. So yeah, but speedrun.com would be the page to go, because we find mostly resources, discussion, Discord links, runs from people, and also explanations.
And there is also a Deus Ex speedrunning discords as well.
For
as
example.
Know, right?
Yeah,
we could definitely put the link to that in the video description. If anybody's interested in getting into Deus Ex specifically, that would be a good place to start, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So there was something that I mentioned, of course, in the intro, is that next to being a speedrunner, you're also a martial arts athlete competing in Wushu. I wanted to ask about that, because do you see, of course, you're competing in that as well as a sport as you are competing in speedrunning. Do you see any parallels between doing that type of sport versus speedrunning? How does that compare for you?
Actually, a lot. But I think it's like with a lot of hobbies that at some point you need to do a lot of repetition. For example, if I want to improve my stances, I need to do a lot of low stances, and I need to train my muscles, and I need to do it every day to get like the fluent movement from one to be. Same with jumps. If I want to improve my jumpings or my coordination or my weapons, then I need to practice more and more often with that. And it's very similar in speedrunning when you do it with a glitch. Like sometimes glitches are very simple, but you need to still practice them to know like, oh, what is my alignment? How can I make it consistent? How do I use the setup? And then you just practice it until it's like a no-brainer and muscle memory takes over. And it's the same in martial arts. Like you throw the same kick, the same stances, with the same weapon routine over and over and over until you don't need to think about it, and it becomes like normal in that case. So for someone who's new, it might be like, oh, very tough, they need to understand it. But for you, as someone who does a lot of repetition, it is fine, and you can still find the little tweaks to improve it, and that is what I find so fascinating. So in that regard, it's like very the same, but it's also like very generalistic, like in any way. It's the same when you play a music instrument. Like if you practice the same part over and over and over, you get more fluent, you get like better frequencies, like you hit the strings much better, and it becomes smoother. And it's like the same, it goes into the same direction, and I love that. That is why I like to do it. And since in sports it's a bit different, since your condition is always different. Like let's say today you have a lot of energy, so your forms and your power and everything is like on the top, so you can perform very well. But the next day you feel sluggish, something happened, you're mentally like low on energy, you're just exhausted, and then you try to do it, it is tough. Like in speedrunning, obviously your mentality also will hinder you to perform well or not, but it's not as restrictive. Like
the physical element doesn't influence you just as much as with sports. I guess with music, I guess it's a bit more as well, right? Because what you're saying about how to practice things and everything, I see very big parallel with music there. Because if you're like trying to learn a guitar solo or something like that, then it might be just a joint effort of 10, 15 different elements, so to say, and you want to practice each and every one of those first separately before you kind of put it all together into one thing, right? Which in your case would be the run.
In music, there's that element that you bang your head against the wall and you don't get something, you can literally do it for years and not get better. Like I know so many people who play for decades and they still play at the exact same level that they played at 2 years in. And at that point, you need to make an active, conscious effort to solve problems and to move forward. For instance, I had this problem with my picking technique. Now we're getting super specific, like with fast picking. There was a certain string jump I just couldn't perform. And I just thought if I kept going and kept going and kept going, just kept banging my head against the wall, eventually it would fix itself. 10 years later, still not fixed. And then one day I try a different hand position and boom, there it is.
You know, it is very funny that you mentioned that in sports. It's also something similar, which I also experienced, which is called the plateau. Like even though you put even more effort into it, you do more of the training, you increase the intensity, the result is the same. Like even though you do more, it's like you're blocked. And then at some point you're thinking differently, which I had like with one of the jumps, I need to do like a 1.5 turn jump and land in a low stance. And I just couldn't perform it. Like I didn't know what the issue was. And then I figured out, oh, let me try to just straighten my back further so that I'm like just kind of like stretched in the air when I do the jump. And now I can do it consistently. But like for 4 years, I was struggling so much and I was so frustrated with that I couldn't
because
continue.
In the guitar world, I remember having this discussion on Facebook with some people back in the day, like 12 years ago. I really have this problem. I have this problem with this one specific string change. I cannot do it at high speed. It falls apart. And people just kept saying, just keep practicing slow. And I'm like, nope, that's not it. You need to understand the mechanic and solve it. If it doesn't come to you naturally, and I think especially as you get older, it is really a thing. There's this whole issue with crystalline and liquid intelligence. The older you get, the more conscious your effort needs to be to overcome your problems instead of just winging it and there it is. No,
can't just like put effort into it and throw effort against it and hope that you will pass an element like that. I mean, I remember when I took lessons from you, then there were some moments as well where I was convinced that my left hand was my problem. Or no, it was the other way around. I was convinced that my right hand was the problem, and actually it was the left hand that was kind of informing the right hand. But it was something that without that external insight, I would never have been able to understand by myself.
Yeah, and I take singing lessons. I've been singing for like 10 years now, a little less, and I still take singing lessons every week. Because there's just some stuff that I would never, ever in 100 years figure out. Just, my false chords are contracting if I make a certain vowel sound. That's very interesting. How do I get rid of that? Oh, I need to pretend that I'm laughing without actually laughing, and then they come apart. I would never figure that out. Never, ever.
Yeah, how do you get to that, right? But that's kind of the reason you come back to the community effort, right? You're bringing in some other people from outside that maybe have a different experience or started out differently, have more experience, or just a different outlook on things, and all of a sudden that kind of like breaks that glass ceiling that has been there for a long time, and it can happen really fast, but just can't overcome it with just time, I guess.
Now, for the musicians in the podcast, we obviously, through my other YouTube channel, we have a bunch of musicians here in our audience. Let me ask you, so we, in our little pre-conversation, before we started recording, you mentioned that you're a bass player.
Yeah.
I find that very interesting. I would like to know what kind of music you play, how you approach the instrument. And I just want to note that I find it curious that you happen to be a bass player, because the types of people that I've met that are bass players are the furthest from who I would consider to be speedrunners. I would actually think that speedrunners are more inclined to become probably guitar players or drummers. People that are very mechanically minded, that also have an element of competition within themselves, within their personality structure. So how did you get to play the bass of all instruments?
Yeah, I already said it before the podcast started. So like back then, a friend of mine or multiple friends of mine, they were like playing together after like every Sunday after our A levels situation, just together playing some random musics. And I was just coming along, and they had like 2 guitarists, 1 drummer, and 1 singer. And so they were like, oh yeah, we actually need someone who is also playing the bass. And then they were like, oh, it's actually also the easiest instrument. Like, yeah, Heinki or Heinrich, you wanna learn it, you just need to play those 4 notes and then just swap back and forth. And I was like, sure, I could get that, right? So I literally started with them just playing, and then we started to get more and more into different songs. They're like, oh, we want to play for the songs from Arctic Monkeys. So Heinki, learn the bass notes. And I'm like, sure. And then I realized, like, oh wait, this is getting more complicated. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'm dedicated. I'm gonna do that. So I started learning it, and then got more and more into it. And then we were like, oh, there's actually this Japanese metal band we love to hear. Like, let's learn that one.
You got me curious. What band is it?
Maximum the Hormone.
I don't know them.
Oh, they did some openings for enemies too, but they're basically like a metal band and a lot of slap bass. And that was the moment I fell in love with playing bass, because like they had so many.
Oh, so it does come back to technique.
Yeah.
You are interested in the mechanics.
Yeah, I was interested in mechanics. Like when I was playing, like obviously when I was playing Arctic Monkeys, I loved it because it was not only those 4 notes when we were playing. What was this song called? Green Day something, I forgot.
Basket Case. American Idiot, Basket Case.
I'm not. I forgot the name. I will need to check it out. But there were like only 4 accords on the bass, and for every instrument.
Holiday.
Yeah, exactly that one. Yeah. And I only did that the entire time. Like for the 3-4 minutes the song goes, I can't remember. And when I was playing Arctic Monkeys, it was more interesting because there were different techniques, and I had no teacher. I had no idea what I'm doing. I was like, I want to play with my friends, and I'm just gonna try it. And I managed to learn it. And then later on, I checked how people are doing it, and then there's like, oh, slap bass, tapping, and so on. And then I got more and more into it and started combining it with when it happened with Maximum the Hormone band, and I started playing their songs. Suddenly, when I saw an X on the note, I was like, what is that supposed to be? And so I looked it up and saw how people played it, and was like, okay. Started getting into it, and since then I'm still playing it. Like, not
you're probably the best bass player of all time. I'm kind of interested to hear now.
No, I'm not that good. Like, I cannot improvise. I cannot read notes at all. Like, I only see a number, and then I know, okay, I have to press.
That's interesting. So you learned the bass on a mechanical level, but you don't understand the music itself. Like when you say you can't improvise.
Well, what I mean with improvise is like if I hear someone play on their guitar, I don't know which note it is. I don't know which one I need to play along with them. So I only can play the parts I know of. Of course, I can swap the rhythm. I can swap the amount of notes I'm playing in that moment so that it sounds still fine. But if someone is playing like a random note, I don't know which one he's playing, and I don't know where it is on my bass. Because I never learned that basics. Like, I've completely skipped that and went to the part where I'm like, okay, I can...
Speedrun it.
Yeah, kind of.
But honestly, that is enough, right? In most cases, like, if you can play prepared parts, then that's totally fine.
Yeah, and
I think it's a funny thing though, because what you said at the beginning, like that, bass is easy. Go do that because you'll be able to learn it easily. That's such a common sentiment. And then you hear Henrik Linder from Dirty Loops, for instance, and you're like, okay, bass is not easy at all.
Yeah, those are the extreme cases.
Yeah, that's extreme. But I mean, I don't really agree that is that easy, because I mean, I've been playing guitar for 18 years now. I play bass as well, but I can't make a simple bass line sound as good as any bass player that knows it better than I do. And I just don't know why,
And that is the artistry. That's the artistic element. That is not within the video game. That is a different thing, because that's, I think, what distinguishes it from sports, which is what speedrunning essentially is. It's a type of sport, right?
Correct.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess it's a cross between sports and science in some way, right? Yeah. Especially if it involves all the coding and decluttering.
I guess many sports are also science, right? If you want to go into the technicalities of how muscles work and those kind of stuff.
Physics, biology versus computer science, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
and with music, there's a sports element for sure, but it's mostly about the artistry.
Yeah.
I mean, there's also the theory part where at some point you need to know how you can make it like sound nicer or like higher or get a certain depth or how you make the connection.
Well, that is science. That is actually science.
Yeah. Or why a certain note sounds good against a certain chord and why it sounds the way that it does. That's more. Yeah, I guess that's also sciencey, maybe. Yeah.
Wow, that was the biggest digression in podcast history.
we ended somewhere completely different where we started, but I guess that's what we go for, right? Yeah. Shall we wrap this one up?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
All right, then let me say, Heinki, thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts that you joined us on this one. This was super fun and super interesting, and we hope that we might see you again on a future episode sometime. It will be super fun.
No, hell yeah.
Yeah, that was very insightful. Thank you so much. I learned so much.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Really nice experience.
Yeah, as I said, thank you for inviting me and for also loving Deus Ex games and letting me show you how everything works and going into the depth of it. I'm very happy and very pleased that you invited me here. And I'm definitely coming back if you want me here again.
Definitely.
Hey, you wanna plug something? You wanna anything that people should know about?
I mean, sure, like if you want to see some of the speedruns I do, I'm on Twitch under the name Heinki. I also do it on YouTube, there you will just find the videos. If you want to see the sport parts of it, I'm on Instagram under Heinki111992, where I mostly only post like Wushu stuff. And besides that, if you want to get into speedrunning, just go on speedrun.com. I think that is the easiest way to find it. And once you know how many speedrun marathons are happening, take a look into that. People will always explain every game in small details and how it works. And maybe there's a speedrun event in your local area, so I can always suggest going there, because once you say you're interested in learning a run and the runner is there, you will not leave the room until you learn to run. This is how welcoming the speedrunning community is normally.
Well, I'll speed run to my local kebab place now because they're about to close and I'm really, really hungry.
Yeah, I'll drop all of the links that Heinki just named, Twitch, Instagram. I'll drop them all in the description below so you can check it out if you're interested. Highly recommend doing so. Heinki is super entertaining to watch. Thank you very much, Heinki, and we're signing off.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Like
Bye-bye.
and subscribe, comment. Ciao.